He started talking when he heard the songs of Woody Guthrie. Now, for a guy like my father, raised in the Oklahoma Dust Bowl, Woody Guthrie was the perfect guy to finally level that playing field. His words were a shocking cure for the silences in the corners of my dad's past, especially these words.
You think you're different from us, but you're not. We had the same things you have: a house, a home, a job of work. And then something hit us, and we lost all that.
I took both of my parents to go see this wonderful stage play. It was called Woody Guthrie's American Song. And those magic words were at the end of the first half, the half that had to do with the Dust Bowl. When he heard those words for the very first time, he suddenly didn't feel quite so small anymore. I asked my mother what was wrong with Dad, and she said, well, he was there, you know.
We thought it was a prairie fire. We'd never seen anything that looked like that before. The sky was clear that day for a change, till we saw the dust on the horizon. Edges curling like fire, moving faster than anyone could run. One man picked up his kids and started running. He was crying. He knew there was no chance of outrunning that black fire. We ran back to the dugout that was a storm shelter. All 6 kids, Mom and Dad. It was so dark you couldn't see a thing. I remember Dad saying, "For God's sake, Alma, light the lamps." And she started crying. There were 3 lamps already lit. We couldn't see them.
Dad and all of the other refugees of the Great American Dust Bowl saw their self-respect erode just as dramatically as their land had done. And the first story that my dad ever told about it was of the day that came to be known as Black Sunday, April 14th, 1935. That's how it looked to a 12-year-old kid. It looked like black fire. And I could see it. I could see it. When he told that story, he was talking to the cast of the show that we had just seen, because I had a friend in that show and I had introduced him to all of them, and he started talking. But the story that he told from his own memory was news to me. After Woody Guthrie gave my father's voice back to him, he told those stories for the rest of his life. He's probably still talking. He could tell a riveting story at the drop of a hat. So suddenly there we would be in the middle of the rainy Pacific Northwest in a summer afternoon, and a story would come, and we would be back in Oklahoma actually tasting that dust.
Mom would pour a glass of milk, and before long it would look like chocolate milk with all the dirt that had settled on it. You had to try and drink it fast. We put the dinner plates on the table upside down, and when we were ready to dish the food up, we'd turn the plates over, and there was a ring around the clean space where the plates had been. It was like smoke. It could get in anywhere. I used to try and keep things clean. I had a part of the house that I would try and keep clean. The other kids made fun of me for it. I used to wash my socks every night. They thought that was hilarious.
He could sometimes start talking in the morning as soon as anybody else was up to listen to him. And then one day, the story changed.
As dust got worse, every Saturday when we went to town, we'd pass a funeral and an auction.
And he burst into tears. Well, maybe sickness and despair are acts of God too, I don't know, but Dad stopped talking then for a while, for a few hours. He was remembering the dust pneumonia that took so many people's lives, children mostly, old people. And once in a while it would take a farmer who just hadn't given up. So he was still farming his land while his land was blowing away. And the widow would have no choice but to sell off everything she could and pack up a few belongings and all the kids and just hit the road. And Dad would talk about rain. He talked about the lack of rain and the hope of rain. When my stepdaughter was a teenager, she had this assignment for school that I thought was absolutely brilliant. She had to interview an old person about their life. So she chose my dad, and she asked him about his days in Oklahoma, and he talked about it in a different way to her than he ever had to anybody else. And he said this.
Well, I was actually born in Michigan in 1923, where my father worked for the Ford Motor Company. And he was let go in a mass layoff 5 years later, and we moved to Oklahoma, where his father lived. There was no rain to speak of for the next 7 years where we lived, so I had to describe it to the other kids. One kid said, "Is it like being stuck under an open faucet? Wouldn't you drown?" And I said, "No, it's more like a big colander way up in the air."
By the time Dad told that story, I had been a singer-songwriter and a folk singer for a long time. It's really not the most sensible thing to be, but it's what I was, and it's what I still am, and it's what I do. And Dad always listened, even though he had a hard time listening to some things, but he always listened to my songs. So I thought, when he started talking about his childhood, that it was about time to put some of those stories into song form. And besides, I had an assignment to do that. I had the assignment from the great Utah Phillips, storyteller and songwriter and rabble-rouser, troublemaker extraordinaire. I told him some of the stories, and he said, "You realize that you have to write about that, don't you? Or I will." Hey, Dad, I have a song I want to play for you. Is that okay?
Okay.
One morning my mother said, "Take the blankets and sheets from the bed. Just before we cover the doors, soak 'em all down good and wet. Cover the windows too, so the worst of the dust won't get through. They'll dry hard and black, be washed and put back, but there isn't much more we can do." And it wasn't the same in Michigan, though we left there when I was just 5. I tell all the kids of 4, 5, and 6 of what they've never seen in their lives. The rain, millions of drops coming down, fills swimming holes deep, sings you to sleep. It keeps all the dirt on the ground. Every week someone else gone. Every week we pass a farm. All their possessions all out for auction on what had once been the lawn. And the dust can ride on a sunbeam, piggybacks on every breeze. It's lighter than thought, but it crushes the crops. It fills the air that we breathe. Maybe I'll tell my grandkids someday, if I get old, how all the kids' eyes opened up real wide at the tall tales I told about rain. Stand under it as it comes down, with your head tilted up, your eyes squinted shut, tasting the the drops on your jaw. I just wanted to let you know that I was listening.
Oh, you sure were.